Hey there, team. Time for today's lesson, lesson 74. There is no will but God's. The idea for today can be regarded as the central thought toward which all our exercises are directed. God is the only will. When you recognize this, you have recognized that your will is His. The belief that conflict is possible has gone. Peace has replaced the strange idea that you are torn by conflicting goals. As an expression of the will of God, you have no goal but His. See, we have two parts of our mind, is what this text is getting at, and most spiritual texts out there, the ego mind and the God mind. And we've invested a lot in the ego mind, thinking I'm a body, thinking I'm physical, thinking this world is real. But anything that comes from fear, shame, guilt, anything that's on the lower vibrational scale is an illusion. It isn't actually real because it wasn't created with God. Thoughts of God and with our God mind are done from a vibrational space of love, of joy, of freedom, of knowing. That's what we really want. And what this text is saying, and this lesson is saying, that when we join with the will of God in love, that's really who we are. That's really what we want. We're not in conflict. It's not even a choice. It's what we want. We're just a little bit confused or a little bit focused on the wrong thing for too long and have forgotten how much this means to us. There is great peace in today's idea, and the exercises for today are directed toward finding it. The idea itself is wholly true. Therefore, it cannot give rise to illusions. And I think this really has to do with surrender too. And I felt this. I was on a trip. That's why there was a little lapse in me making videos. This is a big book to travel with. And I was going there to get more books. So there is no will but God's is also saying surrender. I was sitting next to one guy at the table at the dinner, and he said to me, my journey, he was a therapist, one of the only people I've met that likes being a therapist. And he said, it renews me, it gives me energy. He said, it was hard until I surrendered everything to God. And then I said, God, if you want me to do this, this is on you. And from there, it was easy. And now it just fills him full of light of love. And I remembered that when I read this lesson, because there's no will but God's. This is about surrender, saying, hey, God, I just surrender to you, and all good things are going to come from that. It isn't about giving up our will, though. That's what this is hammering home. It's what we actually want. We're actually in line with His will. Let us try to recognize this. Okay, so the idea itself today is wholly true, therefore it cannot give rise to illusions. Without illusions, conflict is impossible. So without the illusions of the ego mind, we can't be in conflict. Let us try to recognize this today and experience the peace this recognition brings. Begin the longer practice periods by repeating these thoughts several times, slowly and with firm determination to understand what they mean and to hold them in mind. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. Then spend several minutes in adding some related thoughts, such as, I am at peace, nothing can disturb me, my will is God's, my will and God's are one, God wills peace for His Son. During this introductory phase, be sure to deal quickly with any conflict thoughts that may cross your mind. Tell yourself immediately, there's no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. If there's one conflict area that seems particularly difficult to resolve, single it out for special consideration. Think about it briefly, but very specifically. Identify the particular person or persons in the situation or situations involved, and tell yourself, there is no will but God's. I share it with Him. My conflicts about blank cannot be real. And this doesn't mean that they're not going to feel real, especially if you're really invested in your physicality, in your ego mind. They're going to feel real. But what we're doing here is understanding that thoughts are beliefs are just thoughts I continue to think. And the more I think a thought, the more it's ratified, the more stronger my belief in it, and the more the law of attraction is constantly reinforcing it to me. So to shift that momentum and to shift what I'm attracting, I've got to start with my point of power, which is with my imaging device, my imagination, the imaging device from God that is creative. So I've got to start with these thoughts. I've got to start focusing them, because thoughts or beliefs are just thoughts I continue to think. So if I continue to think new thoughts, they'll become beliefs. That's where really this work is pointing at. So there is no will but God's. I share it with Him. My conflicts about blank cannot be real. After you've cleared your mind in this way, close your eyes and try to experience the peace to which your reality entitles you. God's in control of everything. God didn't create death. God didn't create shame or guilt or anger or fear or despair, any of it. Reality contains only the good stuff. love. Sink into it and feel it closing around you. There may be some temptation to mistake these attempts for withdrawal, but the difference is easily detected. If you're succeeding, you will feel a deep sense of joy and an increased alertness, rather than a feeling of drowsiness and enervation. Joy characterizes peace. By this experience, you will recognize that you've reached it. If you feel yourself slipping off into withdrawal, quickly repeat the idea for today and try again. Do this as often as necessary. There is definite gain in refusing to allow retreat into withdrawal, even if you do not experience the peace you seek. In the shorter periods, which should be undertaken at regular and predetermined intervals today, say to yourself, there is no will but God's. I seek his peace today. Then try to find what you are seeking. A minute or two every half an hour with eyes closed, if possible, would be well spent on this today. So there's no will but God's. I seek his peace today. That's such a satisfying, peaceful thought. And the first two times I went through this, it didn't have as much meaning to me. But now I am really getting what this means. Because I don't know about you, but I'm up to having a really good life. And if that means surrendering my ego self, it's a process, but it happens. And I do feel the amount of peace there is in really trusting that God has me, God has it all, that he is a loving base, that Jesus is a loving base, and that Jesus had a real message that isn't associated with eternal damnation, crucifixion, suffering, sacrifice. That was all misinterpreted. This gives me so much hope and opens the way for me to be a Christian, even though some of my beliefs are in conflict with current Christians. But what is a Christian? A Christ follower. And Christ is in my mind. The second coming of Christ is the dawning of Christ in each of us, in our own minds. But it's shared. So the more of us that get there, right? It's the shedding of this, that I can be in conflict, that I don't want God's will for my life, that if I surrender to God, that I'm somehow giving something up. But now that I've watched many more people since I even started this march to the grave and not really get anywhere, I mean, that's where we're all going if we don't do this. We must achieve salvation while we're here. Even though I think we go to a great place and it's super happy, I think we have to come back and repeat, wash and repeat until we reach salvation here on earth in this body. That's what you were doing with me, right? Two minds joined together. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day. Remember, there's no will but God's. I seek his peace today. You're going to have 2 major practice periods, right? And in the longer practice periods, you're going to say there's no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict, and let like thoughts come to you. And then just let spirit envelop you. Let source, let God envelop you today. That deep sense of joy and alertness, in case you can't tell, I'm feeling it today. So I hope you do too.